Hey everybody, welcome to the program WRSA Radio. I am your host, Grenadier One. As always, I hope you are having a good week. It's been a productive one for me. I got a lot done around the house over the weekend, projects, and even had some time to meet up with a couple of people for some topical conversation. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, because those conversations were kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum, and it really got me kind of thinking about a good topic for the show today. Now, I will preface the show by saying I am having some what looks like to be equipment problems, so the show might have a little bit of a hiccup in the middle, but we'll get through that, and maybe I can edit it out if it's not that big of a deal. Anyway, what we're going to be talking about today, let me give you a little bit of background. First conversation was with an old friend, and it was very upbeat and very optimistic. And I've been trying to get him to move into the same area that I live in for some time now, and I think he's finally seeing the value in what that brings to the table. It's just a very interesting situation. See, he's kind of a traveling man. Work has him moving all over the place, so it's understandable that he would not want to, buy a home and settle down into an area, if his job has him on the road for just days and days at a time. I totally get it, totally understand it. He would rather kind of rent a place that is basically a long-term hotel room for him. I get that idea. It's actually really solid forethought on his part, since he's single and he's not tied down to a specific location. But I get the impression from him that he gets somewhat uncomfortable if he's stationary for too long. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but it seems to be the case. I think that might be a problem for him. It's one of those kind of hurdles that you have to get over. So the idea of him giving up this freedom of road life and kind of pinning yourself to one place is just probably something that's really uncomfortable for him. It's kind of a challenge. It's something he's gonna, he has to face. So the other conversation was with someone who's kind of on the other side of it. He's kind of got the opposite outlook. This is a guy who came into some money a number of years back, and I guess he used that money to kind of live out what most of us would probably be striving for these days. He bought land, he built a farm, populated it with animals and crops, and he's got so much put away that he can now supply food and milk and eggs and cheese to the neighbors, and he does this consistently. It's a lot of work. He devotes a lot of time to it, a significant amount of time, his personal time, to this. And the problem is that he also has a job that has him taking on contract clients. I'll put it that way. And that job, or those jobs, take him away from the homestead for longer and longer periods of time. And the conversation that he and I had was about the lack of community and how difficult it is to build something with people who don't really see the problems and the dangers that we are facing, what's coming down the road. And he's kind of come to the point that he doesn't really see the point of living that homestead life anymore. And he wants to give all that up and become more of a nomad, like my other friend. He wants to buy a camper or something like that, and maybe make those contract jobs more convenient. He can go and stay near those jobs or something like that. And essentially what he's going through is kind of a loss of connection with those around him, and he's under the belief that rebuilding those connections is far more difficult than it's worth. At least that's what I got from the conversation. And maybe I'm incorrect here, but that's my impression. Now, I've spoken before about how I believe that the advantage that the commies have over us, those of us on the traditionalist side, is that they have focused on the organizing part. They put significant amount of work and effort into organizing, and it pays off. And they're generally followers, and it's far easier for them to kind of gather in groups and look for someone, who's going to be the leader for them, someone who will tell them what to do. It's very easy for them to do that. And what they lack in tactical training, and I mean that more in a broad sense, but from a tactical standpoint of being able to do things, they can make that up very quickly. It's just something that we have to face as a movement as we go forward. Is they have an advantage over us there. The problem with the traditionalists is that we have countless number of alphas who want to be in charge, and not enough people who will recognize their limitations and recognize that it's probably better for them to be a follower and not a leader. So we end up with these factions and these splinter groups and this, it's just so very difficult to organize anything above a handful of people on our part. Now there's infighting and backstabbing on really both sides in all of these areas here, but and that's always exploited by those who seek to control us. But we have to come to an understanding that all that just has to be reckoned with. It's just the nature of the landscape. You're just going to have to get over those things and go on about what you're doing. You can't let all of those things keep you from achieving things. It's very disheartening, so it's understandable why my friends might feel the way that they do about things. Why bother trying to do more than, just enough for yourself when everyone that you try to work with or you try to engage with just lets you down in some way? I understand that. I'm sympathetic to that. I feel the same way about a lot of things. But what I want to do for these guys who I hope are listening to the show is try to rationally paint a picture today that maybe helps clarify some things for them. Now, you guys may or may not know that a few years back, my wife and I sold our home and moved into an apartment. Now, we did this during the pandemic because we wanted to take advantage of what we saw was an opportunity. And then we had to turn it into something that would be long-term, and be long-term in a place that we wanted to be, which is where we are now. We felt like if we sold our home and we got into an apartment, that when a homestead or an area came available to us, that we would have the advantage of being able to move very quickly and get there. Now, this is a very strange feeling that came along with that, and I didn't really know what to think about it. It was exhilarating and somewhat scary at the same time. We were suddenly, free. We were free from a mortgage and any kind of actual obligation that we had to anybody but ourselves. So there's a real attraction there, okay? I had been living in homes that I owned for decades, and it was just something very much unaccustomed to me, to be living in this small space without having all of my things. I was reduced down to only the most important stuff because everything else had been placed in storage. I had a few hand tools that I thought I might need. I had some games and I had gear and certain things, but that was it. And there were many times that I found myself going, well, I would do this, but the things that I need to do that are in storage. It was just a very, very weird thing for me. But there was a simplicity to that you really can't know unless you've kind of been suddenly thrown into that situation. It's kind of the other side of the equation that people who are going the opposite way are going through. When you're a renter for so long, maybe that's all you've ever known is living in an apartment or living in a small house or something like that you're renting. when you buy a home, it's kind of this daunting thing, and there's a lot of apprehension that comes along with that. Suddenly life gets more complex. Suddenly you need more things than you did before. Suddenly you're tied down to something you were not tied down to before. Suddenly things are far more permanent. But that permanence, however, means something. It means you're part of something. It means you have more of a chance to build that network and community that you're seeking out, that you're looking for. It's very easy to become discouraged with people and disappointed with them. Trust is something that is hard to build, but very easy to lose. And I guess for me, the outlook that I take is that I don't ever really expect anything from anyone. I take them at their word, but if they never live up to it, I'm not disappointed because I never expected them to actually do what they said to begin with. I'm more happy to be surprised by people when they accomplish something, when they say they're going to do something and they do it, and support them when they do something. But I don't look for people to do any more than what I know that they have done in the past. And I take that view that if I want something really done, I need to involve myself. I either need to do it myself, or I'm going to find somebody who is doing it, and then I'm going to join in with them or help them if I can. Some shape, form, or fashion. The bottom line is that all we can ever that's all we can ever really control. We what we ourselves do, and then we can only hope that others do what they need to do. But if we help them along the way where we can, and then maybe it will inspire others to do more. Community and organizations are largely what we make of them. And if you spend your life expecting others to put in just as much as you are, then you're likely going to be disappointed, always. I put in far more than I ever expect to get out of them. And I put in because I see a need for it. And I know there is some output and there is value there in the end. And I think it will work out better for me because of what I've put into it, not necessarily because of what others are putting into it. What I mean here is that we can't expect others to build the community and organizations and be disappointed when that does not happen. That is not really, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but we also can't expect everyone to put in as much as we do. With all of that in mind, why do you think nomadic life would be a better solution to that problem than homesteading? There are advantages, of course, to being nomadic, but there are a lot of disadvantages as well. Every problem that you face in a static position is magnified when you are mobile. You can't carry enough food and water to sustain yourself for a very long period. Your security becomes 360 degrees at all times. You're always going to be an outsider where you're traveling. You're always going to be in search of energy supply. You're always going to be a team of one or two or maybe a couple more if you've managed to get some tag-alongs or you've got some children or something like that. But it's always going to be this small team, and that means that all the work is divided among just you. And you have to do all of that while you're trying to solve that 360-degree security problem that I've mentioned. If we go back and we look at history, there's a reason that nomads were not ever really that successful as civilizations. And yes, the Mongols conquered a wide land area, but they eventually even settled down into cities themselves. So cities, or at least villages, are the foundation of civilization. So that's kind of the internal side of the nomad equation, but think about the external. What makes you think that you will be allowed to be mobile in a collapse or in a civil emergency? During the pandemic, we had county governments shutting down roads and not allowing people into the county who didn't permanently reside there. You may be in an area and a lockdown occurs, and suddenly you're not allowed to even get out of there. You're pinned into a place that you have no connection to and no contacts, and you really had no intention of being in that place at all, but suddenly you can't leave. So now what? In the end, there are far more problems that come along with mobility than with static life. And really, from a practical standpoint, you kind of want a combination of things. You want to be able to have a patch of land and a community, but you have to be willing and able to pick up and leave it if you are forced by circumstances to do so. You got to look at things from a broad sense, of course. But so, why would you give up on your place? Why seek out temporary convenience for corporate America? Well, money, of course. We all have bills to pay, and that can be a very powerful motivation. It just seems to me that the pathway that everyone should be thinking of and making decisions about should be, how do I get out of a city or urban area and get myself established in a rural area? And that should be the driving thought behind everything that you are doing. How does this move me towards my goal of getting out? If that's your goal, then you need to look at where you can reasonably expect to get to and begin putting together a plan to move there as soon as you can. And even if it means a long drive into work for a while, into that corporate job, for the temporary inconvenience of, a 2-hour commute, you're buying long-term security in a lot of areas. And this is how I look at certain areas. It's how I looked at the area that I moved into, is I judge them on what I term security. And security means to me that no one can take it away from you without a fight. So when assessing an area or land or whatever, wherever I'm at, I'm going to look for these things. I'm going to look for physical security. I'm going to look for food security. I'm going to look for energy security, medical security, water security, sanitation or hygiene security, and finally financial security. Do I have a means of establishing trade there? So all of those areas, those are the 7 kind of key areas that I assess things with. And when I looked at the area that I am in now, it met all of those requirements. There was security in all of those areas. For the most part, there were multiple layers of security in those areas. If you have those, then you're generally going to have a robust community. You just may not know that you are in that community, or maybe you just don't know your current place or your role in it. But maybe that thing, that role, that place will present itself when the situation changes. So I guess the message here today is that sometimes we go looking for things because we think that there is something better down the road, and the truth is that it's here where you are, but you have to maybe do things a little bit differently and see things a little bit differently than you're doing now. Maybe that means that in order to have what you want, you got to give up something that you already have that you think is maybe more important, but it really isn't. So tell me what you guys think. That's all I got time for today. Like and subscribe. Come see us over on Gab and the Mothership, and I will see you on the next episode.